I grew up largely in the Gulf. So when I'd come in for my 11th and 12th, and we had a long interview for selection in my 11th grade, at the end of it, I remember my mentor then, Sumitra, who came up and said, I've interviewed kids over my 15 years of experience in school, and you're the first girl who came up to me after a 4-hour interview and said, I want to do social work. I have never heard that answer. So that's where it started. It started with saying social work I have to do. I was a proper social activist, walked across this country, lived off highways, lived off sleeping bags, and, in Jantar Mantar, screamed on top, climbed poles, done all of that at one point of time.
Welcome to another session of My First Job. Each week, we look at a different career profile. We look at a different field of work altogether. I have a young, vibrant entrepreneur. Rajasri Sai of Prarthana heads Impactree.ai, a company which is into data analytics, and she's examining ways in which data can be used to assess impact on the ground. There is one thing about planning and policies and money actually being spent on programs, but what happens to the lives of the people who are a part of this is really what Rajashree is looking at. Good afternoon. So great to have you on the show, Rajashree. I know that there's a lot you've been doing.
So like you just said, I'm the founder of Impactree.ai, and we started Impactree with a mission of impacting about 1 million people way back in 2017 when we started it. So far, we've been part of initiatives that have impacted about over 2 million people across this country, and we operate in India and Saudi Arabia. And what we do is very simple. We build technology platforms that is focused at enhancing decision-making on the ground in two key sectors. So we largely operate in the sustainability space. That is, that you would have heard buzzwords around ESG, you would have heard around social impact. All of this falls under sustainability today. But what we've realized through our experience is that, this is all great at a mission level, right? At the founders levels, organizations say net carbon zero, someone is saying impacting 70 million people. What does it mean for the ground level operators? How do they translate that word net carbon zero or impacting someone in sanitation or water? How do they perceive it? Because these are the people who are implementing it on the ground day in and day out. If it's an NGO, it's a block level officer. If it's a corporate, which is a listed entity, which is set this mission, it is their factory worker, their operational heads. They are the ones who are actually going about implementing this vision. So our platforms that we build are SaaS-based platforms. We sell it and retail it for a license basis. It's a technology product that we sell to these two customers, whether it's a corporate or an NGO largely, and they fit it into their stream to collect data. So through their organization, they're able to implement it, collect matrices that make sense to them, and that way scale better programs. So that's what we are focused on most part of our day is what we are working on is that. Of course, the other initiatives that we do run is Neti, which is our platform for women entrepreneurs in rural India, largely. So that's the second big initiative that we work on.
What has led to this decision? Sometime in college, did you have a problem or did you understand what is it that you wanted to be doing?
So if you ask me, when I was in college, did I know what I was doing or I would set up Impactree? The answer is absolutely not. In college, I was an economics student. One thing though I was very, very clear of right from the beginning is that I wanted to pursue a career in social impact or social development. And that was something which was like a no-brainer. It was something I wanted to do. So very much when I was doing my school with the school KFI, which is it was here in Chennai. I grew up largely in the Gulf. So when I'd come in for my 11th and 12th, and we had a long interview for selection in my 11th grade, at the end of it, I remember my mentor then, Sumitra, who came up and said, I've interviewed kids over my 15 years of experience in school, and you're the first girl who came up to me after a 4-hour interview and said, I want to do social work. I have never heard that answer. So that's where it started. It started with saying social work I have to do. I was a proper social activist, walked across this country, lived off highways, lived off sleeping bags, and, in Jantar Mantar, screamed on top, climbed poles, done all of that at one point of time. And then along the way, I think what was my pivotal turning point is when I was doing economics, I said, hey, I want to do Indian economic services. So there's one thing that my dad always taught me. He said, whatever you do, you excel, but you make sure it's very different, right? So even as I said, no IAS, I'll do IES. Why? Because no one knew IES. It was Indian Economic Services. No one did. So I said, I'll do Indian Economic Services. I did choose a career in arts for that also, that primary reason. But then halfway through trying to prep for that, I realized that I may not be very suited for a career in the civil services. And at that point of time, I did quit. And then the next thought that came into me, because I didn't want to pursue economics, which I was pursuing then, I told my dad, I'm going to quit everything. I'm going to become a lawyer. He said, hold it. No, you don't quit halfway through your graduation. You finish your graduation that I've paid for. So, he said law equals company secretaryship or CS. Pause, you have done year one of graduation, finish that and do a CS degree. Again, I didn't have a clue why I did it. Took up CS, did it. I wrote all the exams in first attempt. And again, I like setting up goals. So that time the goal was clear CS, I will distribute sweets to everyone in the town and all of that. Cleared, got into a listed company, sitting in there. And then the question hit me, and now what? Right? Like you've done it. So that's where I think the most interesting turn happened for me. That's why I tell in many places I'm a recession entrepreneur. Because what happened is the year I got into my listed company, for which I had struggled 3 years and multiple exams, was the year that recession hit. So in 2010, I remember around March 10th is when I joined a very large listed company here in Chennai. At that point of time, when recession hit, you realize that there's no legal work to do, right? So there was a very large, significantly large project for merger and acquisition that the company was, actually had entrusted me with. There wasn't any work because if no business happens, there's no documentation. And if there's no documentation, what does a team of 15 lawyers do? Other than sit and play Minesweeper. So those days we didn't have Geo. So we were sitting here playing Minesweeper, reading newspaper, going for lunches. I mean, there's only that much you can do, right? After 10 months of recession, I just told my dad, I can do something. I'm quitting. I can't take this anymore. So that's when I put a bet with myself. I said that, hey, if I get through the Jagrati Yatra, that was again a whim. I'd applied for the Jagrati Yatra. It's a train journey where 500 entrepreneurs go on a train journey across India. This year, in fact, the applications for the G20 Yatra, I think, are still open. And it's pretty interesting because you get 500 perspectives of entrepreneurs, those who are career, very senior AVP level people across the world to come on the Yatra. So I said, if I get through the Yatra, I quit. So fortunately, unfortunately, I got through. So I quit after that. And that's when I think my real journey began. When, as a CS, I started working with a bunch of people. I came upon NGOs, was doing compliance for NGOs. And someone said, hey, I think you'll do way better as a partnership manager, as a donor manager or implementer. Why, compliance, this paperwork, you can do anything. So, but then our advisory board member, Prema Gopalan, of course, she's no more there right now, but she had told me, I feel you have way more talent than reading legal documents. Come on to implementation. So I did my first project. We did a very large project to implement and creating women entrepreneurs in rural India, selling clean energy products all across Maharashtra, Bihar. We scaled that network across Indonesia and Africa. And that's where the story of the sector birthed me. So from there, it has been a journey where, I dived into data with my co-founder Vivek and Impactree was born.
That's very okay. So this Jagrati Yatra by itself, it's a really different format, right? It's 500 entrepreneurs. And how long does the Yatra last?
So it starts on the 24th of December every year. And then it goes all across. So it starts from Bombay. And the Yatra is a period of 15 given 20 days. So between 15 to 20 days. So as young entrepreneurs or change makers, you will live off a train. So it goes from Bombay to, Kanyakumari to Vizag. Then you're going to Bihar, UP, then coming to Rajasthan. And then you finally come back to Maharashtra. So it's a little circle across the country in sense. And it's very interesting as a format because I think what I chief took away out of it was that there are, and I'm sorry to use the word, but there are many more idiots like me who also want to jump and try figuring it out. So, till then as a lawyer and a company secretary, you're pretty shielded, right? You're almost like corporate job, 9 to 5 desk. And, after that, most of the friends who are in traditional careers, it's relatively paved, right? You have your house, you have your 2 children, you have your vacations, you've set it all up, right? It's a nice pack of building blocks. And then I think in the Yatra, what I took away was there are a lot more people who are trying to say, what's the meaning of my life? Let me try doing something. And even if I fail, it's okay. I think there is a lot of wisdom in collective failure. You find more ways to fail faster, and then after that, get yourself up and build yourself up. So I think that was my biggest takeaway when I went through the yatra, that there were more people like me aspiring to do something different. And I think more importantly, find your passion. Like I remember one of my earliest mentors, Krishna sir from here in Chennai, he told me, we're all born with a purpose. What's your purpose, Rajasri? And he told me this when I think it was what 20s, just out of college. For a very long time, I kept thinking, what's my passion? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? It has almost taken me close to 12 to 15 years to finding the purpose. But I think the part is the journey that actually gets you there.
And the other great thing when I was thinking about the yatra is, I think all of us have had train journeys. Now, of course, the current generation doesn't really need to go on those 48, 72-hour trips anymore. But that is a time when you made another set of friends because you were thrown into very close quarters with people. And you got to know them better in 3 or 4 days than you would know some of your friends who met only in the evenings or on weekends and things like that. So I think whoever's come up with this idea, it's a fantastic idea to bring together extremely committed and driven people.
And then Shashank Mani Tripathi is a founder of it. So you can definitely check him out. There's a whole TEDx talk that he's also given on the Jagrati Yatra and how he created it. I mean, he's a contesting MP from Uttar Pradesh and Purvanchal right now. But I mean, it's phenomenal because I agree with you. In those days, and I remember till 2008, 9, we still used to do the train, right? Now also, if you get into a train, most people just cover, they go up to the bunker, cover themselves, put their iPods, and, everyone is streaming. And I remember, I was in Chennai, Bombay sometime back in 2008, 9, and, there were these four uncles, very sweet. We chatted about politics, India, geopolitical situations, wars at that particular moment, economy. Then the uncles actually called his relative, was getting a breakfast in Pune, and said, you know what, they have two youngsters here. They don't have food. Get them food. So, those relatives bought the food the next day. It's a whole community you build, actually.
Yeah. That's and those I think are the real learning points because it's learning by actually getting immersed. Now they call it immersive, but an evening of immersion is nothing. This, like you said, you have to be on the train and you have to get. The reason I'm going into this also is because I think apart from learning in a regular environment, which is like school and college, something like this, which takes 2 weeks, is defines, like you said, you were thrown into close quarters with people from so many backgrounds and so many different points of view that it's like that friction leads to another set of sparks, which you may not have actually, at that point in time said, okay, that's the crazy part, isn't it? That you go for a program and then when you ask, what did you learn from it? It's very difficult to articulate.
So, no, but I wouldn't agree with that because I think it's the yatra, the way it's built, and at least it was, at that point of time when I went. I remember, someone once told me that you set a lot of goals in your life. Yes, I do. Because I remember when I went on the yatra, I was just, a person who quit her job, literally threw away a very promising career in legal, and I'd possibly got there. Even my mentors then said, why? Because, first attempt, gold medalist, you're sitting here, you've got the position you want. At a ripe age of 22, they gave me an M&A project, right? Which is mergers and acquisitions, pretty large for a kid to handle at that point of time. So I was, really think that the company was also saw potential. So even they didn't want to let me go and they said, bye. But I remember when I was confused and I was sitting at the yatra, and, it's something that Shashank kept telling me. He said, if I wake you up at 2 in the morning, you should be able to give me your 5-minute elevator pitch. What you're doing, why you're here, where do you want to head, right? And I did practice, and he did ask us one day. So our one pitch that we do through train car sessions was something at ridiculous 2:33 in the morning. Okay, because there was no time in the rest of the day to do those pitches. But I think that those things also, the way it's structured, it helps you kind of also start. You may not know where you're going, but start to also putting to what do you want to pull out of that experience, right? Like different people might pull different things out of it. But the more important thing is to also be to be able to direct to say that, why don't you start thinking down this path? Because otherwise you can also end up going so broad, you may not really know where you want to start focusing on.
So when you talked about the project which you helped set up with Swam Section with Prema Gopalan, what exactly did you have to do to set up this whole thing?
So in that project, I was I was handling Swam Section Prayog's legal documentation before that for a period of a year. Before Prema kind of, took me aside and said, hey, so this is a project with USAID. And the whole mandate under the project was to create, within a period of 3 years, we had to create a network of 1,000 women entrepreneurs across 6 districts of Maharashtra and 3 districts of Bihar who were capable of retailing clean energy products. So all the way from your solar lamps to your water pumps to your, biogas units, home biogas units of Kirloskar, or up to, even those times at that point of time, very high-ended home lighting systems with solar. So they had to look at the entire value chain of products and start retailing it to rural households. So I was the partnership manager and implementer that I went on in the project as a consultant. And my role was largely to see that all across the pipeline. So all the way from the training and initiation of these women to what are the roadblocks they face while they're scaling their businesses to actually creating the pipeline of partners who can keep pushing products to these women. Because, creating a network is one thing, but the network doesn't have enough deep partnerships to sell, then you're not, and or products to sell, right? Like, for example, Amway has a bouquet of products, right? So we did a bouquet of clean energy products at that point of time, all the way from your 500 to 24,000 rupees, right? Across the spectrum of products that women can retail. And how do you get them to retail it in rural households? So that was the whole aim of the project. So at the end of 3 years, we had actually leveraged the project almost 4 times over in terms of partnerships. So partners not only gave products, they put in money, they gave grants, but they also gave free products to these women. They, helped them set up manufacturing units of, small things like solar repair shops, solar lamps, all those kind of things that they were actually partnering with the women because they saw value to start looking at working with these women as their last mile point. And that's
So did you have, yeah, sorry. So did you come across any particular incidents of women who stood out? How would you know that a woman is an entrepreneur, for example, or capable of being an entrepreneur?
So I would think that as I've seen, Venu, that often across is that most women in India are entrepreneurs, right? It is just that like we don't recognize entrepreneurship or define it very differently. That's why if you see every day, you have the unicorn, the decacorn, the sunicorns, and the endless cons that we keep throwing out there. These are all Silicon Valley definitions of entrepreneurs. And I don't think that's how Indian enterprises operate. So the metrics that you hear everywhere, 14% of India has women entrepreneurs. I think it's a very, very underreported number because our matrices are not right. In most of the Indian context, if you see across India, there are in every household entrepreneurs. Now, the thing is, most of rural India, 70% of rural India gets their primary income from agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most hardest enterprises in this country. And the problem is we don't give it its due because you need to think of it just as an enterprise. There's so much that people like you and me who run data or service businesses can control, right? You can control the client, you can control the delivery. In agriculture, you can control nothing. You have to wait for the water to fall, or you have to use the reserve of water sparsely at the right moment so that you hope for the right crop, right? The saddest part is you don't recognize this as entrepreneurs and you don't recognize this as an enterprise, right? So that's where the fundamental problem starts of where do you find these entrepreneurs? They exist. They're already doing something entrepreneurial way harder than what we all do regularly. Like I remember I told someone, oh, I know agriculture in and out. I've been doing it for 15 years. They're like, yeah, have you tried growing? I said, no, that's where I don't know agriculture. I stand corrected, right? I definitely think if I went to the field, I possibly would fail, right? So it's one thing to have the theory. It's another thing to grow something based on a nature thing and grow it up. So I think the first point is there are entrepreneurs. The second point is many of them are doing agricultural livelihood businesses. Many of these are family businesses. Unfortunately, in all your definition of unicorn, decacorn, family businesses is not counted. And who isn't a family business in this country? Everyone is, right? You name one top NSE company from Reliance to Aditya Birla, everyone is an entrepreneur since generations in this country. Even take Coimbatore, right? Pricol, so many of them are in Kiwis. All of these are family enterprises. We are a nation of family enterprises. So the reality is many of them do agriculture, they have family enterprises. Where the definition goes against them is many times family enterprises in agriculture are called subsistence. By subsistence, that simply mean it's just enough to survive. And that's where we have taken a Western definition and we have gone wrong. We have taken a Western definition, and I remember a few Republic days ago, our Chief Prime Minister Modi had actually said, we need to be proud as Indians and have Indian definitions to what we do. He's right. We took our definition subsistence. We didn't understand it much and we put it in agriculture. Now, every woman who's working in agriculture and doing multi-livelihood, in which case she's doing poultry, goatry, vermicompost, food businesses and agriculture is called subsistence level entrepreneur. So she's not even considered an entrepreneur. So the thing is, when you change the definition and you say, remove the word subsistence, they're doing an enterprise to survive. They have their own family dynamics. They may not have external employees, but if I have been able to trust and get my husband in a job and make sure he leaves his job, you imagine the trust I have in my own business plan. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. That's a huge amount of risk taking. So if they have their family in their enterprise, they're doing subsistence level work, but removing the word subsistence, they're doing multi-livelihood is the change that we do call them. They're doing multi-livelihood work. Is there a way to take them, add some more dimensions, teach them how to go to market better? The minute we just took that, we found many entrepreneurs across the country. Our job was only to help them get to market. And you'll see, if they implement something in clean energy works, you'll see them the next year implementing it themselves in agriculture. They will scale their private business also. So you don't have to worry. It's just about giving them the right skills to think of scale.
Okay. Okay. So Impactree came out of an understanding of what needed to be done on the ground. Why did you think that you needed to measure impact?
Well, it came largely actually also came from the USA project. And I'll tell you why. Because what has to happen is that we used to have a lot of consultants who did very good work with us. But unfortunately, by the time these consultants would go into the field and give us a report of what was happening on the ground, and we would actually go about implementing it, the time to implementation sometimes would take 6 months, right? And to give you an example, right? If I've done a training in implementation and, onboarded a particular women, we onboarded women and we used to offer training in the morning, right? So we used to tell our trainers were available in the morning. They were employed with us. So we said 10 to 2 o'clock, we would call you for training. And after 2 o'clock, please go sell your product outside. Okay. And I expect you to sell your product till 6 o'clock when it's dusk. Makes perfect sense from an urban mindset. You have 4 hours to sell. Give and take trading, 2 ghanta kam hoga. You still have 6 hours to sell. Women should be able to really sell. It was a massive failure. I'll tell you why. Because we didn't factor into account how the women's clock worked. So till 10 o'clock in the morning, they generally would send their children. They would prepare all the, whatever they had to prepare for the day. And then after that, when they would come out for training, they would be tired by 2 o'clock. And 2 o'clock, when they would go into households to sell, there weren't enough decision makers at 2 to 6 in the household. So there would be the wife, or there may be old people or their children, none who can take concrete decision on anything more than 200, 300 rupees to buy. And the products that we were trying to retail were close to 15,000, 20,000 on EMI, of course, but sizable scales, right? So we started, by the time we got this very important input from one of our data decision, partners on the ground, we had finished 8 to 9 months of training and implementation. Then for us to go back and recover the time was a real large challenge. The second challenge, for example, we figured was that, we said that women have to be empowered. So, you break away from your families, you go, you sell, you become a retail salesperson. We did a lot of marketing campaigns around that. Most successful women, we realized after 6 months, were whose husbands accompanied them to sell. And the husbands started pushing them. So after 6, the husbands would take the bike out with the women, give them ideas for marketing and taking them into the villages. Some husbands even retail their products in their own shops. And then the women would be given training by the husband saying, aise batao, vaise batao, and try selling. these dynamics we realized very late, right? And we started after, in hindsight, I realized that was also because we didn't have the tools to capture this data as it happened on the ground. So we relied on consultants who would come to us and give us this data periodically. But by the time the whole synthesis would happen, I would get it at a board level. It would percolate further to the ground. It would just take months and implementation period would be over. So that's when actually Vivek, my co-founder, came into the picture because he comes from a manufacturing background, right? So for him, he was working at that point of time with Reliance and leading some of their biggest technology plants. And the data was everything for him, right? He would get millisecond level data. And here I was not able to figure out, how do I reconcile?
What happened over months?
Yeah. So then it started with a small thing saying, some of the things you implement in manufacturing, can we try it in the social sector? That's where we started. We spent an entire year doing that, where we would collect data. Vivek and, would synthesize it. He'd help us, give us models to build it up. And then we started seeing field level efficiency improve. Because the first thing that we understood, we realized it's because of three nuances. And that's what we built our platform, Prabhav and R3, which is Prabhav, which is our social impact platform, R3, which is our ESG platform, is built on this basis. Okay. First is we have realized Excel means a lot to me and you. It means nothing on the ground. 80% of this country doesn't understand Excel. It's only we top 20% who can keep learning micros, macros, and all of that and figure things out. So we realized data has to be visual. So we took out data and we said, I'll give you a pie, I will give you a bar, I'll give you some dancing, horizontal straight pies. Then you start understanding data because your eye is able to perceive something. The second thing we realized very crucially.
Sorry, can you go a little deeper into that, Rajasri? How did you visualize the data?
So how we visualize the data is, if I have to say male and female, right? A number 24 and 25 doesn't mean anything. Your head will not automatically add it in most places and say that, okay, these are the, 49 people that we're talking about. But when you see a pie, right, and you say, okay, 40%, 50%, and it adds up, or it shows you two bars, you're able to visualize more male, less female, right? Those visualization nuances changes for you, right? So that is the first thing we cracked. We said that let's make data visual. Can we have a platform where you can start visualizing data? You want to compare this year with next year, compare. Everything will come to you as a visual. It will not come as a box in a 4x4 number, right? It's very difficult to understand numbers. The second thing we realized is remove this whole madness of English. Okay. If English is again known by only 2 or 4% of the population as fluently as we both are speaking here, the rest of the population speaks a vernacular language. So why can't data be collected and represented in vernacular language form? So most of our platform is built on a vernacular language base. You see it in the language you understand. We will collect all the data in vernacular language. If you want for synthesis, yes, it comes in English, for at the analytical level of those who see those data. But everyone can visualize and look at data in vernacular language. And that's why we started looking at data. When we solved these two challenges, we started seeing a lot of field level implementation challenges coming down. Only because of the fact that data was more something people could understand. They need not fear data. It's a friend, right? And then when that happens, you start seeing that how important it is to take decisions. Like, a lot of, I was reading an article somewhere where it said the world is data, AI, everyone is, there's a whole hype, chat GPT, we are going to lose jobs, 70,000, 80,000, 1 million jobs gone. But, when I keep reading all of this, I realized that 5 years back, this is where the social sector was. There's a whole lot of hype on data, system, you name it, everything we were implementing and still not getting through. But I know that the whole hype will be there, then the dust will settle. And then at some point of time, we'll get realistic on what these tools can do for us. And at that point is when you will see the magic starting to happen.
Right. So when you made the data visual, what is the change that you noticed on the ground? What were the differences in assessment that began to happen?
So first is when we made it visual, someone who is just a 12th or a path or a graduate can start to understand it, right? When it's a number and there is no understanding of big or small, you start struggling if you're not educated enough to understand what is the association. When you start seeing it in forms where something is big, something is small, you start relating to it a lot easier. So I'll give you an example. We were running this project with one of our donors in about 24 villages in Nanded district. This is a project with SSP only. where the aim was to look at maternal health. And this particular donor and SSP had tried everything. I mean, they were seeing that this particular districts, these 24 villages in the district were very backward. They had a lot of challenges where, the girls are married very early. They had miscarriages, heavy amount of abortions, stillbirths, all of that. So they identified it to anemia. So then they started saying, okay, girls are very young, they're anemic. Let's start giving them supplements. A lot of investment went into fortified products, fortified pills first. When people stopped eating medicines or didn't eat to medicine, then fortified products started. So whether it is biscuits, whether it is daily items that can be fortified with iron, we used to give girls that. We did all of this for about a year and we were still not seeing results. Adoption was not happening on the ground, right? So then this data that we started collecting in 24 villages, it was made available, or we sat down on a group with this data present open on our platform with a lot of Anganwadi workers, Asha workers. So in every village across the country, there are health workers that the government designates. Their main role is to help in the case of act as a midwife or get people to the PHC, etc. So sat down with the Asha workers and Anganwadi workers who are like community leaders in various villages. They, of course, operate the daycare system, but they are in de facto community leaders. And we started showing this to them and saying, we're not able to understand where we're going wrong, right? We've tried everything. Why is this not reducing? And I remember some Anganwadi workers and Asha workers looked at the data and they said, you got it all wrong. So I said, okay, thank you. What did we do wrong? We have spent a lot of hours on this. Where are we going wrong? They said, you're collecting all this data and you're trying to find a solution without factoring into account decision maker on what women eat. So I said, okay, that is interesting. So what do you mean by that? So they said, see, it's not the daughter-in-law who decides what she's eating. It's the mother-in-law who decides. And you're selling pretty much kids who are about 20, 25 with the heart in the right place. They are social community workers. They are going to mother-in-laws and saying, aapki bahu ko ye khilao, isse ye hoga. And the lady is humoring them because we're put in India. We're not going to tell you that, you're bad or, why are you wasting like that. We're not doing that. They were just nice people. We're looking at the lady staring at your Haji, Haji, please give me the packet. Thank you. And doing all of that. And then she throws it on the side. Like, मैंने कम बच्चे पाले क्या ये अभी आके 20 और बैठ
मुझे सिखाएगी
मुझे सिखाएगी बच्चा पैसा करना है. So that's where the problem was. So we realized by the time the women ate, right, the husbands would eat, the family would eat, the children would eat. So even if it's a chicken curry, she's eating the gravy. The pieces have gone. So she has no nutrient value which is going into her system. And they said that this health awareness is not going to work. So I said, what will work? They said it's clearly you're able to see the social dynamics in these villages. They're poor villages. Why don't we develop a campaign? And this the women came up with to say, how can you benefit by the birth of a better, healthier child? Right? We will give an economic angle to birth. And then this will move Didi. And I said, this was phenomenal. And they did a phenomenal job. They went down and sat with some mother-in-laws and said, कि देखो अगर, आप एक तो समझ लो माजी, कि आप इनको नहीं अंडा मत खिलाओ, चिकन मत खिलाओ, अच्छे का, don't give her the good stuff, it's okay. तो क्या होगा? She will go into C-section. And then C-section होगा, फिर बच्चों को problem होगा. PHC में तो solve नहीं होगा because such complicated cases they won't handle. So she will go to a private hospital. तो आपको 1.5 lakhs तक आपका बिल आएगा तकरीबन when the child is born. या आप अभी उसको खिलाओ. अगर they made a calculation and gave it to the mother-in-law, they said, अंडा हफ्ते का इतना, मुर्गी इतना, and vegetables इतना. ये सब खिला पिला के आपको maximum जाएगा खर्चा in about 7 months, because 9 months में तो she generally will go to her mother's place. 7 months का खर्चा is somewhere around 75,000. Then if she goes for a delivery, please note she'll have normal. And India is obsessed with normal, right? Rural India, everyone, even people who have never given birth, men will tell you normal hona chahiye, right? Like,
I suppose that's the biggest achievement of all, right?
normal delivery hoga. So for 75, maximum another 20, 30 you would spend, 20 maximum, right? So 20, 30 in a PHC, it will get done. तो 1 लाख में आपका बच्चा भी सुरक्षित, मदर भी सुरक्षित. तो आप डिसाइड करो, आपको 1.5 तब खर्च करना है कि अभी खर्च कर लो थोड़ा 7 महीना, आपकी बहू ठीक हो जाएगी. Literally, 8-9 months, kids were born in normal delivery. 2 households got implemented, 24 villages adopted it. It made socio-economic sense. to actually feed the women. And my question is, this insight we cannot see. We are from an urban context. This insight only an Anganwadi worker can tell you. In across India, when we have seen, we know if you don't believe it, about 46% of this country operates in barter system. And we don't even have a way of measuring it. Just today morning, I'd gone to a relative's place. They said, "Oh, you're going to Kutralam tomorrow." So in Kutralam, when I grew up, it was if you wanted to Maligapu, the flower garlands that we prepare here, we would give one dabba of rice. And she's just about 60-year-old. 40 years back, we used to measure life with 1 or 2 glasses of rice. Today, we are pegging it with the dollar and the rupee and all of that. It's not sunk that down inside. How do people understand these nuances? It's only when they see data. We cannot, because of our urban understanding, our urban upbringing, our exposure to the world, which has its own pluses. That's why it allows us to work at it with a different technology lens, but we can't understand what they go through. And who better to actually give better solutions than them on the ground?
No, this is really informative, Rajasri, because I don't think I was, when it came to data, again, it was the same thing that you spoke about. It's all bar charts and figures. And then suddenly you begin to see how the implementation of something on the ground changes. And then when you measure it in numbers again, people say, oh, that, and then the connecting link is gone. What is it that people actually did? In this case, you brought out the connection link, that the Anganwadi people had the insight to say, link this to the health of the child, as opposed to saying, look after your daughter-in-law. I mean, it's such a sea change in how they think. Wow. So are you finding these kind of examples practically on, every project that you work in when it comes down to looking at data points?
Completely. Because, I'll tell you, it's just not an NGO perspective. And that's where, I have a great management team and I have a great board. I'm very lucky to have them. When we were working on a corporate project in Saudi Arabia, we again understood that most of India, most of the world operates on socio-cultural nuances. As human, we collectively like to believe it's all economics. But the reality is most of our decisions are socio-cultural more than economics. And we realized that when we were working with it's a huge multi-billion-dollar company there, and they were having a large problem of attrition, right? So they used to have people who used to come as migratory population, and then, they would be able to put them through the process. They were serving certain things to the Saudi government. That is it's a service-oriented manufacturing company, installation service system company, to put it that way. So when we started using the same lens there on their data, we started realizing they're a unique problem, right? So Saudization mandates that if they have to actually get X% of government contracts, they need to employ people who are Saudis. Now, Saudis are used to a different work pattern than migratory workers. So migratory workers have come there only for a reason, that they need to earn money. So they will pack in that 24 hours for 4 days and it wouldn't make a difference. A Saudi local is not going to be doing that because he lives there, right? So he comes with a different cultural dynamics. So there, my team was led by Vivek, were able to optimize work schedules around socio-cultural elements, which allowed them to actually improve their efficiency as an organization by 37%. And it actually allowed them to increase a considerable amount of their turnover. Because we were able to look at the workflow and we realized it was all built to a migratory population and it was built by someone from the West. So everything was scheduled without actually thinking how a Sri Lankan or a Filipino or an Indian would work. And then adding an element, a Saudi managerial person would work, right? So the whole work process system we had to optimize from a point of view of what are the social cultural dynamics which are nuanced to each culture or sector. And then how can you optimize that into a system or a data point? And that way we are now able to improve an efficiency. So we see that in most of our projects. It's not only about the fact that, how much economics you look at it. You take away that lens of economics and you put in socio-cultural aspects. And that is, which is endemic to that area. You will start to see similarity. And then you will see similarity, like from the Persian side to the, till about China border, we are very similar. Most of us, socio-cultural, till even Indonesia. Then from Korea, it's another segment all the way up to Japan, right? With different ethos, different cultures. But if you're able to take that 80%, which is similar and standardize it, then you have to only work with the 20% which is different to optimize.
Amazing. I I think we've hardly covered your career and talked more about a couple of projects, but I think it throws light on something that you started off with. The conversation we had just before, where you said analysis is not just taking in figures that exist and trying to make sense of those figures, because the background of how those figures came to be and what was the process that was put in place is not understood. So then try to draw inferences from that. Like you said, in the case of whether it was the Saudi Arabian company or the village, without having that insight, how do you even begin to understand that this is how you solve the problem? Because you can say that they need nutrition, but that is like the most basic inference that you can draw. But how do you break this, Rajasri? How do you break some of these things which are so deeply ingrained in how data is collected that you have to bring about a change as you go forward?
So I think the first step of process is standardization, right? And then we have also seen everything is not very disparate. When you start looking at data and you start working on data analytics, you will start seeing similarity more than dissimilarity, right? Everyone likes to think they're very unique. We are not. And right, we are very similar, more similar than we realize, given the similar backgrounds we might come from, right? Because if we have similar backgrounds, we have similar networks, similar upbringing, similar ethical values, and similar exposure. So that way, these are broad benchmarks that help you to start condensing, data which might seem very all over the place to stay to a level that it is understandable. So the first step is standardization. So being able to call out that standardization across data is important. The second step that, of course, that we've built in is using technology. So technology, once you standardize, is a very good medium to scale because you can take something which is standardized, process it into a system, and the system will replicate. And hence, if you see, we took a decision of keeping it as a SaaS or a licensed platform. You use Google, you pay a monthly subscription, you can pay a monthly subscription for all our data platforms so that it's affordable and cheap. And then as the system gets more and more and more data that comes into the system will start to learn. That's what ChatGPT did. And that is precisely how we are driving and looking at our data platforms growing at that sense. And with reference to, of course, like what we talked earlier in careers in data, right? I would think that, and we hire a lot of interns in data analytics. We hire from economics, we hire from engineering. I think there is a three-step process that I might use for evaluation, and maybe it might help some candidates for thinking of careers, because I now see that increasingly you open any YouTube academy, everyone is throwing a data analytical career of some sort at you, right? So everyone is saying this is the in thing, this is the only career where you will possibly never be let go, all kinds of tall promises, right? I think we use a simple three-stage process. First is when you're looking at data, you need to love math. That's the basic. You need to be excited by numbers, right? So understand whether your numbers are naturally you want to pull them into things, want to compare them, see is there some trend that is going. You may not do it for numbers, but this causation habit, right? What caused this? Why is this happening? Are you a person who thinks at that level? Even if you start thinking at causation, math is an easier problem to solve. We have enough and more models which will help you solve math. You plug it in, it will vomit enough things at you at any engine. So it's not a problem. But are you a person who likes causation and wanting to keep on thinking? So the creative types, right, who like to find out why, those are very inquisitive. That's the first benchmark we look at when we look at people we hire for data. The second most important thing that we look at also, at the same time, how much of a big picture person are you? Okay, so when you look at data, it can get very micro, right? So I hear a lot of people saying, I want to do a career in data analytics. Why? I think it's cool. What are you doing right now? I'm coding somewhere. And okay, great. So do you want to code with us? No, I want a career in data analytics. Do you want to do operations? No, I don't want to travel. So I said, then what does data mean? I mean, I can't get you to code. I can't get you to travel. So which means you want to be in front of a system and look at a bunch of numbers. That's not data analytics. That's not how it works. Most people who do data analytics go to the field. You have to be able to talk to people, hold a conversation, because the insights you get from there is where you can train a model. So the maximum money you will make in a career is when you have or develop the ability, use your causation skills to start going into the depth of what cost is even through global things. So you should have the ability to read, right? So if you're able to go look at causation, communicate and read, it's very good to start a career in data analytics. And believe me, this is what I tell most of my team. I say, today Google knows everything. So make sure you're able to read and get the right insight so that that's where you will make your money in the future.
Right. No, and I think another thing that you started this off, that you're understanding that vernacular, a whole lot of data, like you said, is so how have you done that? You've managed to connect vernacular interface to most of the data that you display, and in how many languages? How do you see that change?
So right now, all our platforms, so the data collection happens fully in vernacular. So that's like a survey link or a form or whatever it is that goes out, that'll be first in the vernacular language. We get that because Google's vernacular engines are not properly trained yet. So unfortunately, we can't directly Google Translate. We use the help of people on the ground to refine that, nuance on to get it contextually right. The second thing is that our display features in about 10 languages, we've programmed it for it to display. So there we are using a bit of Google Analytics and our own question bank. So one feature that we built is we have our own question bank on our platform where a lot of the data, what are the questions are already translated in vernacular language. So you can adopt some of that so that you get a constant, contextualization right. And that way, that is a longer haul thing where we are slowly building to. Because the reality is vernacular itself, there are very few companies in India who are operating on vernacular language mediums, right? And I think that will still take time because I still see it about 2 or 3 years away where we will actually have a recognition for Indian languages and then we are able to build on it. Because there is also a lot of dialect issues, right? If I go to an Ajmer, the way Rajasthani, Marwadi or whatever the local dialect is spoken there, it's a form of Hindi is very different from when you go to Jaipur. So there is an element of localization there still.
No, and that's really another aspect of this entire thing, because once you crack this in this particular field, there are so many other places, like you said, where it can be applied to and how it goes. Okay, so how do you see Impactree changing over the next few years? What are the next milestones that you have kind of seen for yourself?
So we are right now largely a B2B company. And as we operate, all our technology platforms are being used by either field level operators or at the board level, right? So as we scale and grow, we see ourselves very clearly growing much. We were one of the 8 enterprises to go to the World Economic Forum. So that we had a
Yeah, that was
market.
huge that you got to Davos.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's an amazing achievement at this early stage. Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So having gone there, we now have exposure to international markets. So the idea is to take our social impact platforms and start scaling it vertically across countries. But at the same time, we are using a lot of the insights we build in our social impact to build a platform much faster in the ESG space called Aarti. So that is the ESG platform. So I've used ESG once or twice on this, the session. So just to demystify it for people who are here, ESG is environmental, social, and governance. And now most companies in the world are mandating that people have sustainability plans. Companies have sustainability plans on how they grow, largely because of the point that we all have realized resources are not infinite. At some point, we're going to start running out of crucial resources. And somewhere companies need to be prepared for that eventuality if they need to survive at that point of time. So we've started working on an interesting platform there, which we've already implemented with 2 companies. And, we're slowly scaling it up as a pilot, largely from a point of view of seeing how does, at the ground level operators and senior operational level managers understand data across ESG spectrum. How can they actually conserve in places? How can they, spend better in certain places and that way neutralize their sustainability score, right? So that platform which we're developing very fast right now, we are actually scaling it through partners in Middle East and Southeast Asia. So the next 2-3 years is going to be really dedicated to scaling this B2B offering for us. And then beyond that, of course, we have certain B2C verticals which are coming up, but that is more, experimental at this point of time. Like I said, we're building a network of rural women entrepreneurs and seeing what is the technology product that can help them scale social and economically. retaining intact their cultural nuances, of course. So then in that end, we are working with traditional value chain businesses, whether it's textile or agriculture. And we are closer to now coming to a point where we are starting to think what is the platform solution offering to a B2C space. So that's the large way that we are going. And we are very much, I mean, like I've said earlier, we are very much as a company committed to listing by August of 2028. And that's the benchmark we've set internally. But, that's something we're working towards with a clear mindset that by that time we would have built a company which is capable of scaling on itself. And that's the core of what we want to leave as promoters.
And you make it, I think it's obviously been thought through very well. I just wanted the thing on what kind of conversations did you have in Davos? Was it more of a presentation of what you were doing, or was there interest in, how is it that you guys are operating and what are the challenges? What are the conversations about?
So I think Davos is a very interesting space for us, to be honest, because it was after COVID. So there was a lot of networking, right? After 2 years, people were like, we are finally here, we can talk, right? Enough of the Zoom 3. Yeah. But I also think that, it was very interesting because we were 8 startups in the Tamil Nadu government at that point of time, with another organization led by Amit, which was Imagine. They had Imagine just, finished its pioneer event in Tamil Nadu here. So Imagine had chosen 8 of us, ready to go to Davos. And the amazing part, and there was another counterpart there called Think Davos who helped us through the whole process. But I think the amazing part of it was that suddenly the bigwigs of the world were like, why did these 8 startups who people did barely knew about? I mean, how did they get to gate crash our party? So there was a lot of curiosity on that, on how did you get here, right? You're not a unicorn, you're not a unicorn. Like, how? But I think
What are you doing here? Yeah.
exactly. So that was a really nice icebreaker because a lot of people wanted to know what you're doing. And I would think from an Indian government perspective, it was very proud to also see the Indian startup scene. We had the largest attendance in Davos in that particular year, the largest arena of Indian startups. So it was a very proud moment also for the government where they were interacting very open with you, trying to understand, okay, can you a solution for us? Can you work with us? So I think a lot of that was very interesting from a startup and a learning curve perspective. I think personally as a founder, I would think how to create a large vision, right? And I don't think there is enough mentorship around that, right? When you interact with the richest of the richest, you always see that plethora of things that they are working with. And
Right.
then how fast they build these systems to learn and fail and learn again and be okay with failure. Often what happens in India is people are not okay with failure, right? Even when you hear the traditional talk on careers, they'll say, engineering karo, IIT karo, ye karo, wo karo. Everyone is like, tuck, 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 and then you die, right? Like it's just well planned out all the way till we go. And after death, because you're gone, we will plan a certain X things you do for you after that. So we've got it planned to even an afterlife level right now, right? But how do you think that what I learned from the rich is how do you perceive something to grow at a scale? I think that in India is definitely missing. How do you start planning for scale? And I think that's something I've really picked up in terms of, we may not exactly hit our listing mark on that day, and I'm okay with it. But if we can envision that every person in Impactree is thinking that every day, and we all are committed to listing, it will happen at some point of time. It's just a question about envisioning that at a scale and working towards it, and then hoping that the stacks will add up, right? So I think that is a skill I definitely learned in Davos because when you walk through the streets, you realize the planning people put into that vision, and that's why it works.
Wonderful. So, closing thoughts, Rajasri, because I don't think we covered all the ground, but I think we've touched upon some of the things that really make you unique and how to look at a career from a point of view that is not the conventional one. Even though data analytics, like you said, is a very the hot thing right now, but you've really shown what is it that you can bring about and what is the change you can bring. So, any closing thoughts, and then
Yeah. So closing thoughts I would say for those who are tuning in, who are really thinking what would be, your careers. I think the most important thing I learned is, and I'll be honest. So I started as an economics grad, then I did my CS, I did my law, then I did my MPA, and today I'm an entrepreneur in data. right? So there's no connection whatsoever to where I started. That's the reality of what it is. But what I've always learned in life is be open to the change. So embrace it. As you're changing, you may not know where it's heading. There is a purpose, it will add up in the end. Where it adds up for me is that as a lawyer, I can today speed read huge amount of data, right? The skill I learned as a lawyer works for me as a data analyst today, right? Because I'm able to read 60, 70 pages in a matter of like, less than 20 minutes. It's a skill I know. It's very hard to translate to others, but it's something I'm trained in, right? And causation is something I picked up as a lawyer. What is the cause? What is the cause? So that depth, keeping in the larger perspective, is a skill you learn. So understand that whatever career, whatever education you're picking up today, there are certain skills that you're picking up, and use those skills to the way that you're able to figure your careers later, right? We get enough people. My other partner, Shesha, is a chartered accountant. Today, she heads our operations when it comes to data analytics. There is no correlation to where she started with. But what is important is she went behind her passion and was willing to make the sacrifices it took to find an end to it. And she's still, in the journey to find. So I would say that start looking at that and start speaking. That's the only way you will be able to figure out where you're heading. Because I often start seeing that when someone says career, first thing, Google it. Next thing, read to a bunch of people who have given YouTube talks. Last thing, make a to go and tell this to friends and make an informed decision based on this limited scope of not even going and speaking to a person who's living in that career. I think that bridge students should do. If you're thinking of a career, find a person who's working in that career, go and talk to him and understand what does his career entail. Because without doing that crucial step, you got all your secondary data right, but it may not be enough.
Wow. On that note, I think, which is you brought it full circle, started with where you were and ended it with how data can be an insight. Thank you, Rajasri, for coming on the show. And here's wishing Impactree the very best in the future.
Thanks so much, Thank you.
That was Rajasri Sai, and she told us about how impact can really be created through data once you have the insights, which is the important part. So, next time, another guest, another show, another interesting career. Thank you for joining us, and here's wishing you the very best in future.